Superhero fatigue was a term that started buzzing around a lot more after the MCU wrapped up its Infinity Saga. While I wasn't totally on board with the idea, some viewers kept referencing it time and time again with all the lackluster shows that came out afterwards. What also didn't help was the fact that Disney thought it would be a good idea to create a ton of shows, which meant that viewers had to stay up to date with them in order to follow the overall narrative. And some of these shows ended up not being great in my opinion. The key word being some, because there were obviously quite a few of them that definitely sidelined that whole notion. Which is what I want to highlight in this video, as well as sharing my thoughts on the recent state of superhero movies and TV shows in general. And since the MCU is the more well-known catalyst within these discussions, we might as well dive into it first. So I had a good time with WandaVision as I've mentioned before, but as it usually goes with these shows, the ending was a real letdown. Honestly, I think it was partly my fault because those theory videos made the show's possibilities sound way more exciting than what we actually got. Maybe I would have liked it even more if I had gone in blind without any outside influence, but I doubt it because a lot of these theory videos made so much sense within the narrative. Falcon and the Winter Soldier came out shortly afterwards, and it didn't really help the situation either. The ideas were great, and even though I didn't fully agree with Falcon getting the shield, I was still open to seeing how it would be executed. There were so many great concepts like Isaiah Bradley's storyline and what happens with US Agent, but the inconsistencies and the storylines not getting tied up neatly by the end made it such a letdown for me. Oh yeah, and his updated suit looked terrible, I'm not gonna lie. Obviously before all this, we had Spider-Man Far From Home, which left a lot of people split on how the story went, but it did pave the way for one of the best sequels, which came out 2 years later. And I've obviously got to mention the DCEU as well, so let's just get through it. It had some movies that I liked, but overall, it was clear that they were trying to copy Marvel's formula instead of doing their own thing, and this was the case since Batman vs Superman. I'm sure I'm not saying anything that anyone hasn't said yet by how rushed the whole thing was and the rewrites, reshoots, and all the behind the scenes drama that made things worse in hindsight. After the Snyder Cut was released, which I actually enjoyed, it did make me more curious to see where the story was headed, especially since it was taking inspiration from the Injustice comics, which is a great story by the way, I recommend it. But that's not happening anymore, so yeah. I mean, I did enjoy the Joker, the Batman, and the Suicide Squad was decent as well, but we'll have to wait and see what happens when James Gunn takes over with his projects, which I'm looking forward to regardless. Since I've already shifted into a more darker tone, I might as well talk about The Boys, which was another show within the superhero genre that released around the same time as Spider-Man Far From Home, but it was a breath of fresh air compared to what we had gotten so far. The show offered a satirical take on superheroes with darker themes depicting them as flawed and often corrupt individuals. It also incorporates real-life events from the year each season was released, making its satire hit even harder but also leaving it dated unfortunately. The show cleverly uses in-universe ads and marketing tactics which not only enhances the satire but also reflects their real-life promotional strategies. This approach works both ways while keeping viewers immersed. But some viewers also feel that the show can sometimes be unnecessarily violent with each new season, and I get where they're coming from. There are some scenes that even I don't like rewatching, but honestly, it's not a major complaint from me yet. Another show that goes against the superhero fatigue argument as well is Invincible, which premiered almost 2 years later, and although it was animated, it still got a lot of people hooked, especially after the first episode, which obviously set the tone nicely for those unfamiliar with the source material. There was one major complaint that I and a lot of viewers had, which was about a certain character being kind of annoying within the narrative, but that was pretty much the only negative feedback which was addressed in season 2, so no big deal. But then that season had its own issues, especially with the decision to split it into 2 parts. A lot of viewers were frustrated by the wait between the releases because it obviously disrupted the narrative flow and their viewing experience, and I sort of agreed. But despite all those issues, the show was very well received and I'm still on board with what's coming next. Those 2 shows obviously aren't the only examples that sideline that whole argument. There are actually a lot more that I'd like to highlight now, but let me just say real quick that the Atom Eve episode, which is a spin-off from Invincible, and Gen V, which is a spin-off from The Boys, added so much more to their respective universes, and I really enjoy them both, but let's just keep going. Into the Spider-Verse, which was the main reason for me making videos like these in the first place, had little to no promotion initially. And that's because Sony didn't believe it would be that great, which is crazy since it ended up being one of the best superhero flicks that I would argue rivaled a lot of the ones that came out that year. Which then happened again with Across the Spider-Verse, and I'm almost confident that they will knock it out of the park with the next one as well. And honestly, what I get from that is creative freedom is usually necessary with these projects, with the right team of course. It's a shame that a lot of people overlooked that movie due to the fact that it was animated, but it's finally starting to change now and audience scores are reflecting that in a positive way. And this also goes for X-Men 97, which I made a video on recently, so please check that out if you want to hear my thoughts on it. I really appreciate it. Shows like Peacemaker, which I'm almost certain I will enjoy since I like the character in the Suicide Squad, but for some reason haven't seen yet, has been getting a lot of positive reviews from what I've gathered. And that's a very good sign, as it is one of James Gunn's projects, so I'll need to check it out as soon as possible. And speaking of James Gunn, Guardians of the Galaxy 3 was one of my favourite movies, probably the only one that year to be honest, from the MCU. Let me just make that clear. I know others might disagree, but it didn't really do it for me. It wasn't perfect though, I did have gripes, definitely, but overall it left me with a range of emotions in a good way, but I don't want to drag this too far, so let's just wrap it up. So overall, the obvious answer is audiences just want great movies with a good narrative and creative ideas for the most part. Obviously people are going to like what they like, but there is definitely a pattern to what audiences will go for typically, at least in the realm of superhero films. Actually, take video game movies for example. For every Last of Us TV show you get a Halo TV series, which I'm surprised is still going on. And for every Arcane you get a Welcome to Raccoon City. I mean, there have been a lot that have done well by incorporating a mixture of creative freedom and great writing while respecting the source material. But back to the original subject. Superhero movies are in a weird spot right now, with some movies that I'm almost fine with if Marvel never puts out at this point, to movies that might hopefully fix things moving forward. And the thing is, I just want to get excited with this genre of movies again. Not just MCU or DC, but just in general. Give me something I can discuss with friends after watching. Give me something that will make me look forward to the next thing. I'm liking the new approach that Disney is starting to take as far as putting out less content and focusing on quality instead, and that's good, as long as they stick to it. The trailer for Captain America Brave New World just released while working on this video, and it looks great. But again, so did Secret Invasion, and we all know how that turned out. We'll just have to wait and see, but Deadpool and Wolverine is looking promising, so at least there's that. And these, which I'm actually excited for. Anyway, let me know what your thoughts are on the state of superhero movies and shows lately. Please subscribe for more videos like these in the future, and thanks so much for checking out the video if you made it this far into it. Anyway, that's all I've got for now, so I'll catch you in a bit.